He started off saying, I'm going to get it done in 24 hours. Then he said, I'll actually have it done before I get inaugurated. And then it was 100 days. And then it's like, well, it's a little harder than I thought. And then it's like, no, actually, no, we're going to walk away in days. He was disrespected in the Oval Office. And who keeps calling the shots? Who hasn't changed? Aside from the Russians, and they haven't, the Europeans, really, they seem to be more in the follower mode. And they're not following the United States. They're not following Donald Trump. They're following after Zelensky. Zelensky has been very consistent. I showed you what what he had said, or what the foreign minister, the Ukraine foreign minister, had said. And by the way, Gary, if you can put that headline up for what Zelensky himself said earlier this year, where he was really emphatic about what he's looking for, and that was that he wants nobody's going to tell him NATO can't come in, that he can't come into NATO, that he's not going to give up any territory, that he's not going to relinquish his territory de facto. And he got really mad when Trump suggested that he's going to lose the opportunity to for Crimea. Yeah, this is the one here. This is what Zelensky said. The ultimate into this is going to, and this is from February. We're in NATO. Putin's in prison. And then in the article, he was quoted saying, U.S. President Donald Trump can not negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine without Ukraine at the table unless several conditions are met, stated President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky with NBC News. According to Zelensky, Ukraine should be at the negotiating table, but Trump's independent approach is also possible, provided the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin leaves all Ukrainian lands, goes to prison, and Ukraine, in turn, joins NATO. Folks, that is just delusional. And if you see the guy that you're claiming you want to get this over with says that in public, directly contradicting what Trump has said, because he said, I recognize that NATO was one of the reasons for this, because he had that conversation with Vladimir Putin. That was, I want to say 2 days before. I think that was 2 or 3 days after the Trump and Putin first talked, where Trump came out and said, well, yeah, obviously it's not going to be NATO because that was part of the reason for the war in the first place, which is exactly what Putin had said. And then here you have Zelensky directly contradicting him. And there was no consequence. Then obviously they had the big blow up inside the Oval Office there. Zelensky keeps on calling the shots here. And he stayed with these unrealistic demands. And explain to me why then Trump won't walk away. There is nothing to win militarily or diplomatically to just continue going on with this unfounded hope that Rubio talked about earlier today, that we hope there's negotiation. The Russians aren't going to do it, and they're screaming that they're not going to do it in the most strident language that they have used to date. And there's been a lot. Maybe the opening day of the war, when Putin made his first declaration to his people about why they were doing what they call the special military operation. He was pretty emphatic that day. But really, since that time, it's been quite measured. That should tell you something. And right now, and look, Zelensky is also a master manipulator on the media as well. Because when I was reading a lot of the articles about this morning, they said, Zelensky upstages Putin. Putin has backed down. Putin fails to come to Istanbul. He didn't meet he's afraid of Zelensky, etc. And I just keep thinking, what are y'all talking about? Putin never offered to come to Istanbul. He's many times said in recent days, we have some very firm negotiating requirements. And if you're willing to meet these, we're willing to talk. We'll have talks without preconditions. Talks at the appropriate level. I think he even specified in that one soundbite that we played before. No one ever said anything. But the media, instead of saying, when Zelensky does call him out like that, because Zelensky tells people that he's afraid of me or whatever, and then the Western media just repeats it. When they don't even look at what Putin had said and call out what I did, which is easy to do. I mean, even if you're just being a basic journalist and saying, all right, here's what he said, here's what the other guy said. Here's the situation here. But they don't. They simply repeat it in the text of their document that Putin backs away or something like that. And I'm like, how can all of these people be so foolish and so smitten by this guy who is clearly a master manipulator, clearly detached from reality? And I mean, we're talking about Trump here just because he's the president of our country. But I mean, I could certainly go through a whole list of things with those European leaders as well. Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, they're still talking about maybe having some kind of peacekeepers inside of Ukraine. They're still talking about that, even though it's been categorically rejected repeatedly by the Russian side. And you want to do that, you'll run the risk of going to war with Russia. And in that kind of case, and Trump said this before, of course, there's no guarantee anything because he's kind of gone back on other things, but he said that if you guys get into attack, that's not an Article 5 issue. If you go into Ukraine, you end up fighting with Russia, you're on your own, because the Article 5 only attacks if you have been attacked, not if you run into a war zone and then end up getting into a fight with the combatants. That's not what Article 5 is for, and we are damn sure not going to go into that. I don't think Trump would ever take us to war for that kind of a situation, whatever he may say or doesn't do. So then you have to ask, what is wrong with these people? What do they think is the outcome here? Now, we've had some people speculate on our show that they think they can outlast Trump, that somehow they think the war can drag on for another 4 years and maybe they'll find somebody new. That is insane. It's also immoral that you're willing to sacrifice another generation of Ukrainian people if somehow they can manage to not fall apart. And by the way, you've got to fund this for 4 years. We're not going to do it. We've given a couple of minor little things here and there, but very small. Nothing like what they need to continue to operating on a day-to-day basis. That's got to come from the European side, or what little the Ukraine side can make, etc. But it is delusional completely to think you're going to drag this out 4 years. I don't know that you're going to be able to make it much past the summer. Now, I will caveat that I thought that last year too, that the Ukraine side wouldn't be able to last through the last summer, and they did. They showed that their resilience is much stronger than I thought, but that's not necessarily a good thing, because that means more of them are dying. And as I just pointed out, they've lost another 2,000 square miles or something close to that in the intervening period, because the war didn't come to an end there. So yes, they maintain their continuity, they continue to fight, but at tremendous costs. Who knows how many hundreds of thousands of men are dead, but now you see 1,800 square miles are also lost because they didn't come to bring the war to an end there. So there is a profound and irrevocable, irrecoverable loss that has come from that to going on. And if you think you can do that for another 4 years, I think you're crazy. I don't see any military way that that's going to go on. And why would you want it to? Why would you want to continue to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of men per year on something that can't be reversed in the war now? President Trump should say, all right, we talked about within days. Well, the days are finally over. We finally reached the end. We're going to say, you guys are going down a path that we're not going to go down. If you won't end this war, if you won't come to terms with the Russian side, y'all and Europe figure it out. It is immoral, and I'm not going to be immoral. I'm not going to join your immorality by continuing to fund and support and allow American help to let more Ukrainian men pointlessly die. That's what we should do. That's a very viable position. It's actually a moral position. We just don't seem to be following it too much. And I just don't know where President Trump's going to go with this. He's tried to play the hard position. He's tried to bring the sides together. Nothing happened at all. And now it's like he's just giving in to whatever Zelensky says. You can't come to a conclusion other than that, because that is what's happening on the ground. And it's very lamentable to me, because it's egregious to me that the losses that they're going to be suffering, and the pain and the destruction on the Ukrainian people, and those guys that keep getting just force mobilized every day and thrown into vans and tackled and all this just because they're at the store or whatever, they have to be terrified. And they probably would be over more than anybody, but unfortunately, we don't seem to be moved by their pointless casualties and losses. And I think that what we're going to find is that Russia is either methodically going to keep going on with this, or they're going to bring a big aero offensive operation into it and break through the lines. Either is possible. But the end result is the same one way or the other. One's quicker, one's longer, but the end is going to be the same one way or the other. There is no path that this can ever be reversed, and there's not even a possibility for it to be stopped at this point. And it's time for statesmen across the Western world to stand up and do the damn right thing and make a hard call and stop this pointless slaughter while there's still time. That's what they should do. We'll see what ends up happening with that. We'll continue to bring you information. Anything else that comes out of these meetings here, if there's anything else from the Russian side, we'll certainly be covering that as well.